When I was a teenager, and before I was a Christian, I was hanging out with my friends at a marina in my hometown when all of a sudden I see all of these people setting up a makeshift stage and getting into costumes. I was curious, as were most of my friends, so we decided to watch. What followed was this in short order. A guy dressed in a white beard was holding a book, and behind him were curtains that looked like flames. The guy in the beard went around one by one to the other people in the play and looked in a book, which I guess was the Book of Life, to see if they were in there. To the people that were, he said, "You believed in my son Jesus Christ, enter the kingdom of heaven," or something like that. And to the people who weren't, he said the opposite. Then the people whose names weren't in the book got dragged kicking and screaming into the flame curtains behind him by a guy in a devil costume. Now, just to give you a little context as to what I was like back then, most of my friends looked something like this. And my entire young adulthood basically sounded something like this. Anyway, after the little play was over, the evangelist started distributing flyers about God and Jesus and salvation and that kind of thing. And who do you think their first target was? Yeah, like a moth to a flame. One of those guys approached a female friend of mine and started going on and on and on about how she needed to find Jesus before it's too late, and she has a choice, and blah, 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 blah. At first, she was patient with him and simply told him that she didn't believe in any of that stuff, but he just wouldn't stop. So eventually, the word bullshit got put into play frequently, and finally, after a good minute and a half of this, she tore the guy's flyer up and literally threw it in his face. She walked away, and I was left there with the guy. I looked at him and said something to the effect of, "Well, that went well," and the guy replied, "I gave her the truth. Now it's her responsibility to accept it." To which I responded, "You didn't give her anything. You just pissed her off." I didn't know this at the time, but I was making a point about effective communication versus ineffective communication. And that is one of the biggest problems with what the people in this film are trying to do. First off, right off the bat, I liked these people. I found them to be a warm, charming, and extremely creative group of people, and I never felt that anything that they were doing or portraying was mean-spirited. Now, don't get me wrong, the portrayal of homosexuals and homosexual relationships as being intrinsically evil is hurtful, whether it's mean-spirited or not. But putting that aside for the moment, I never got the sense that these people hated homosexuals or anyone. I didn't get the sense that there was any room at all in their hearts for hatred. Going back to the Jesus Camp documentary, I personally think that Becky Fisher did hate certain groups of people. I got the sense that she was in a sort of de facto state of war against anyone who didn't share her beliefs and views. These people, on the other hand, seemed to be interested in nothing other than helping people as they saw it, and I think that counts for something. It doesn't excuse what they've done, and it especially doesn't excuse the mistrust that they plant in the minds of young people. But I think Fisher, by her own admission, was trying to sow those seeds, whereas these people, I think, are doing it accidentally. There's a scene in the film where a teenage kid, who's obviously not an evangelical, gets so upset by what they're doing that he flips the bird to one of the show's producers. Now, I understand his frustration, and I was instantly reminded by my experience as a teenager. But what really stood out to me was the producer's reaction. He was calm, polite, and very mildly tried to tell the kid that he was entitled to his opinion, but that he had one as well, and that nobody was forced to go to the show. I thought that those responses were just as valid as the kid's frustration, but more than anything, I just liked the way he handled it. Anyway, I'll now talk about the show they put on in the film, why they produce it, and the subconscious effect that I think it has on the part of the people who make it and respond to it. A girl is drenched in blood after her abortion goes wrong. A boy is dying of AIDS and lamenting God to answer him. A high school student stands before his class, puts a gun to his head, and fires. These are strong images, and they are uncompromising. They are all aimed at young people who this group believes needs a reality check about hell and the wages of sin, and the cause of everything they're seeing is an unwillingness to accept Jesus. That last part is where they run into a massive problem. There are plenty, I mean plenty, of dysfunctional Christian homes. There are plenty of Christian people who abuse alcohol and drugs. There are many Christian people who find themselves in these kinds of situations every day. We as believers are not immune to life or the world or the vices that hurt people. Now, in the case of those Christian people where there is dysfunction, would a closer relationship with God and a stronger leaning on His providence help? I personally believe it would, but that doesn't alter the fact that merely stating that you believe in Jesus will not fix the problem. I hate to keep using the word shallow, and I don't mean to demean these people when I say it. Nevertheless, in this production, there is a gaping denial of complexity when it comes to these issues and their solutions, and that denial causes their understanding of the problems and the solutions to become shallow. Lastly, and I think this disturbed me most when watching this film, whenever I saw these images and the way these people were depicted, something kept running through my head. It gnawed at me until I finally put it into words. This is how they see people who aren't like them. Lost, dysfunctional, dangerous, and totally out of control. That kind of all-encompassing attitude toward people takes a huge toll on our ability to empathize. And that is the greatest danger in the whole affair. The fostering of this black and white thinking. It's either this or it's that. You're either this way or you're that way. You're either with us or you're against us, and so on. I didn't come away from this film feeling worried about the people in it. I only wish that they had more of a capacity to see people, believers and non-believers alike, as people, not just as a narrow state of being. This ends part 3. In the fourth and final part, I'll talk about the religious and political overtones of this film, how I think they affect society, and where I think they make some terrible mistakes.